Hello and welcome to episode 24 of series 3 of the Engaging Internal Comms podcast. This is the show for employee engagers and internal communicators who like to keep up to date with all that is new in our profession. My name's Craig Smith from The Big Picture People. Well, this is the penultimate episode of this series of the podcast, Series 3. We have this interview and then another interview next week. So the next week's interview is with Sarah Turton from Civica. Sarah is going to be telling us all about her experience of leading internal communications within her organisations that she's worked for across her 18-year career. And then that's the final episode for this year. That's going to be going out on the 20th of December. And then we're looking into the new year. We are starting a new series of the podcast, and we have some really interesting interviewees lined up already. I'm going to be finding out in the first episode of the new series all about how we can learn lessons about communications and leadership from motorsport. I'm not sure how many motorsport fans we have on the podcast, and it doesn't really matter if it's your thing or not. We probably all recognise it's probably one of the highest paced, literally one of the highest paced industries in the world, and a very competitive sport and very attractive and glamorous, but also it's a job for a lot of people as well. The Formula One teams have thousands of people who work for them. It's not just the people we see on the TV if we watch the races. And we're going to be finding out all about the challenges of working in an organisation which is very visible, very transparent, very fast-paced, but at the end of the day has all of the challenges that we have in our organisations as well. We've got a real expert, Mark Gallagher, who's worked in Formula One and motorsport for a number of years, and he's going to be sharing us with his experiences. I saw him speak at a conference a few weeks ago, and it's excellent. And then going into next season, we've got some really interesting topics. We're going to be looking at remote working again, which is a continual thing. I think a lot of us are preoccupied with trying to get that to work. We're going to be looking at the importance of trust in one of our episodes. We're also going to be looking at civility and politeness in organisational communications. You may think your comms are really polite and really civil at the moment already, but as any of us who spend any time on social media outside our organisation, and also if we delve a little bit deeper perhaps into what's going on in our organisation, we find civility and politeness as an issue perhaps. And we've got someone who's built a career around this, both in politics and also in supporting organisations after her time in politics. So watch out for that episode as well in the new series. So lots of interesting and diverse guests on the show as usual. Before we go into today's interview, just one final thing. We've got one of our free events coming up in next week. It'll be on the 15th of December, 3:00 UK time. It's our webinar that we run every 2 months. It's all about how you can help employees within your organisation and the leaders who are at the top of the organisation put together that big picture that we all hear about all the time. What is the big picture? How does everything fit together? Our vision, our values, our strategies, all of the things that people are working on. How do we share that lid of the jigsaw box so everybody knows what's going on? So that's at 3 p.m. UK time on the 15th of December. It's completely free. If you want to join that webinar, it's just 1 hour, and you can sign up for that at our website, which is thebigpicturepeople.co.uk. And if you go to the menu bar, you will see events, and you will see the first one listed there is that very webinar. And you can choose other dates as well into next year if you can't make the 15th of December. So, as I said, penultimate episode of this year, and I hope you enjoy today's interview. A topic we've covered on the show before is the connection between external branding and internal communications. And that's what we're going to be looking at again today, because it's one of those areas that I think we can not revisit too often. So in the interview today, I'm going to be talking to someone who's going to be explaining to us the connection between internal and external brand, and also some of the common misconceptions that organizations have about brand and what brand is. It's not just the logo, it's not just the font, it's not just the colors that we use, it's much deeper than that. And how we get our employees to connect to that brand and embody that brand is really important. And as part of that, we're going to look at at the linkages between leadership within the organization and how that drives the way that the brand is lived internally and externally, and the language that's used around the brand and how contagious that can be in a positive sense. The other thing that we're going to be looking at in the majority of this interview is the connection between internal communications and brand, and the fact that sometimes these are seen as two separate entities within organizations. Sometimes they're actually part of the same function, but very rarely are they actually seen as two sides of the same coin. So we're going to be looking at that in more detail. We're going to be exploring the importance of why the brand itself should be able to answer the question as to why the organization exists and what its key purpose is. And then finally, we're going to be looking at the importance of measurement and why measurement of internal comms and the impact that it has on brand is a really important thing that internal communicators should be focusing on for their work and in order to prove the return on investment. So again, it's a really interesting revisit of a topic that we've looked at before, but from a different angle when we're looking at the connection between organizational brand and the role of internal communications in helping to craft and share that brand internally and externally as well. My guest today is Douglas Spencer. Douglas is the founder and president of Spencer Brenneman, LLC, a Boston-based firm which helps mission-driven organizations reframe their focus and remaster their messages. Douglas has over 30 years of branding and marketing experience working with professionals from around sectors such as finance, professional services, tech, higher education, healthcare, and not-for-profits. Before starting Spencer Brenneman, Douglas was vice president, global head of brand management for Thomson Reuters. In that role, he guided the migration of multiple Thomson Reuters businesses to form the then new Thomson Reuters brand. It's also in that role that Douglas first fell in love with internal communications and the power it has to transform organizations into the best versions of themselves. And that comes through loud and clear in Douglas's book, Do They Care? The one question that all brands should be asking themselves continually, and starts by making the case that employees must first care about what you do in order to do it successfully. So, Douglas, how are you today?
I am great, and I am thrilled to talk about my two favorite topics, branding and internal comms.
Fantastic. Yeah, we're bringing the two together. So I mentioned your business is based in Boston. I guess that's where you are at the moment, Douglas.
It is where I am, and So I am focused. I am in Boston, and I'm focused on helping U.S. based companies, but and organizations, I should say. Haven't done a lot of international work quite yet, but there's always tomorrow, right?
Who knows? Yeah, definitely. And yeah, always, even if not, it's a great place to visit, Boston, lovely city. So yeah, wonderful. So anyway, I kind of gave a little bit of a preamble there about your love of branding and internal comms, and you kind of alluded to it there. So just say a little bit more about what is it that you love about it, and how you found yourself, as an internal comms loving brand strategist, as you just describe yourself.
Sure. Well, I've been in marketing most of my career, and then I evolved into branding, and I got to see how there's no such thing as internal use only, right? Everything that happens within an organization eventually finds its way out,
Mm,
and so, but the positive end of that is that everything good within an organization finds its way out as well. So if you can find what makes an organization great, i.e., what is their brand? Who are they? How do they connect with the people most important to their success? If you can really articulate what it is that makes a company great and get your employees to feel that too, to understand that, then that's going to get out as well. So in order for a brand strategy to work, it's got to be consistent and it's got to come to life everywhere. And who
mm.
better to do that than the people that are living it day in and day out, the employees?
Absolutely, yeah, and I'll put some links in the show to some other. We've covered this before, but I think again, it's one of those areas on one of those topics that can't be repeated too often. It's very much kind of definitely bedfellows, and we're working with a client at the moment, or we're in early stages of working with a client, and they've approached us to sort of, kind of we major on internal comms, and they've come to us. Really, they're going through a kind of branding exercise at the moment, and they've asked us for some help around that. And it's interesting because they've got an agency in who they say are doing their branding, but actually they're just kind of doing their brand guidelines and some logos for them.
Mhm.
And I guess that leads me on to the kind of first sort of question proper, as it were. So what are some of the misconceptions around branding, and how narrowly I think branding is sometimes seen when organizations embark upon a branding exercise? And it kind of builds on what you've already said, but I'd like to go into it a little bit more detail, please, Douglas.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. The biggest misconception I think that people have is that branding equals logo. And logo is it's just a small part of a brand. It's just one of the many ways a brand comes to life. Now,
Mm,
I really believe that brand is the relationship that you have with the people most important to your success, your customers, your prospects, the people you serve, the people who fund you, the people who work day in and day out to fulfill your mission. A brand really needs to go in and articulate in an authentic way why what you do is important. What is it you do exactly? How do you do it differently and better than all the other options people have? And what's the best way for that to come to life? What is your brand's personality? Are
mm,
you academic? Are you vivacious? Are you serious? Are you irreverent? So your brand really has different personalities, and that has to come to life in how you sound, the tone of voice that you use in all of your copy and all of your speeches, and how it comes to life in the way you look, the
mm,
colors you use, the fonts you use, what does your logo look like? All of that comes together. And so branding is way more than just the last bit of what I said. It's everything that comes underneath it. It's the
mm,
foundation for everything. And
mm.
so that's the biggest misconception I think people have about branding.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. No, I totally agree, and I think we're going to go on to talk about kind of more of those systemic issues or systemic manifestations of brand as we explore this together. But it's interesting as well. I think I'd be interested, just to to get your thoughts on this as well. As then I think that then also relays into the employee experience, the employee branding experience, and I'm going to talk about
Mhm.
internal comms in a moment, but one of this client who I'm just referring to there is one of the conversations I had with them, or one of the questions I asked them fairly early on was, so what are you doing about, the way your leaders act and treat their employees, and carry themselves within the organization, and how that aligns or misaligns with your brand as well. And again, it was an area they hadn't really thought about. I know we're
Mm.
kind of going kind of link, we're going to be talking more around internal comms, but I'm interested in, is that something that you sometimes see, that there's that kind of incongruence between this whole kind of brand story and then the way that, people behave within the organization as well?
Absolutely. I mean, they
Mm.
call it leadership for a reason. People at the top of an
Mm.
organization
Mhm.
have to lead. I have a client now, and they did this before they engaged with us, but their
Mm.
senior management team, it's a biotech startup, and their senior management team put together these principles for how they are going to do business, and one of them is we will not talk behind each other's back.
Mm.
And they this is very clear. They make this very clear to all their employees. This is something they talk about on a regular basis. And I talked to someone who's an executive assistant there, and he said, yeah, well, it's totally true. They do not talk behind each other's back. And I think that is a brilliant way to set the stage for an internal dialogue,
Mm.
because if you're not worried about what you say being repeated incorrectly or used against you, or then you're freer to just to talk and share your thoughts and be
Yeah.
engaged. You're not on the defensive.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Okay, so let's go on then to sort of talk a little bit more about the connection between branding and internal comms, which is kind of what this interview is majoring on. And for some people it may be blindingly obvious, but for others it may be kind of, well, what is the linkage? So, be really interested to sort of hear it in your own words, Douglas, and then just sort of explore that in a little bit more detail with you.
Right, absolutely. So when you think about a message that an organization has. They need to get their message out, and they do a lot of different. There's a lot of different ways they do that. They
Mm,
do that through obviously digital marketing, through content marketing. There's all sorts of different ways. But
mm,
going back to what we said about the fact that there's nothing internal, um, if you if the brand does not take advantage of the voices they have in their employee base, they're walking away from a lot of opportunity to get their message out.
mm,
And
mm,
I like to remind people that, in my opinion, language is contagious.
mm,
Think about all the things we say on a daily basis that we got from a partner, from popular culture, from just our coworkers, our family. Language is contagious. So if you can create language inside an organization that is positive, that is authentic, that is compelling, that is differentiated, then as your employees go out in the world, whether it's in a professional setting like talking to customers and prospects, or whether they're at a cocktail party and talking about what they do, that has a massive impact on a brand's success. I mean,
mm,
what do you want? Do you want someone who goes out and say, "Oh, at say a cocktail party, what do you do? Oh, I work for this company that does blah blah blah." Or
mm,
you get someone who's really engaged about it, who likes to talk about what is special about where they work. Obviously, it's the latter. And so if branding can be if the brand can come alive internally, then it's going to come alive externally. And so it's just the marriage between internal comms and branding is not only in my mind nice, it's imperative.
yeah, 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 definitely. That kind of advocacy, I think, is really, really important. Both as advocacy as a great business to do, or company or organization to do business with, and as a great organization to work for as well. I think that
Mhm.
works in both ways. And I think that does link into what we were saying before about it's not just because I guess the implied message from that then is that the internal communications, they do have a huge impact obviously in driving employee behavior, but again, as it sort of links through to what we were saying before about the importance of good leadership as well, and mirroring that.
Mm.
It'd be good to get an example from you of where you've seen that connection work, because I hadn't kind of prepped you for that. I was just going to kind of recall a story from one of the interviews that I did, very, very, very early interviews I did with when I first started the podcast, and it was with a company who they were basically, again, an online electrical retailer. In fact, it was the very first show we put out. And we were talking to someone there who was head of internal comms and branding. So there you go.
Nice.
There is a kind of definitely a synergy there. And she was telling me a really interesting story about one of the things they do, because the kind of customer service element of what they do in their market is really important, because it's kind of a commoditized, lowest cost sort of market where you shop around, and if you can find it cheaper, you usually go there. And service, can be a differentiator in that sort of situation. And when she was telling me, they have this kind of little kind of sort of thing that they teach their people or train their people and communicate to their people, which I really like, which was make decisions that your mum would be proud of, and treat every customer like it's your grandma. And I really like that, because it's kind of like, you don't need to, you kind of, you kind of get it, and it's kind of, you don't need to explain it in any more detail, but it kind of also embodies the sort of, the way that they want to be respectful, and they want to be kind of, do the right thing and help the customer make the right decision, and not kind of, do anything that oversell or whatever. So I really like that. And I think that's a really great example of, it's not about the logo, it's not about the kind of great adverts and that sort of stuff on the internet and on TV. It's actually about the experience your customers have when they interact with you, that can be that kind of really where the rubber hits the road, as it were. So anyway, that was my example. I'd be keen to find out any kind of connections you've got that kind of really reinforce that link between branding and internal comms, Douglas, if that's okay.
Right, sure. There's plenty. I'll first share an example of how not to do it, or why it's so
So it's good,
important.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So there was Santander Bank, which of course is a Spanish-based global bank, was moving into the U.S. market, and they purchased a small bank here in New England. And the small bank just happened to have the same color palette as Santander. And the story goes that their one of their internal comms people told me that the story goes that a customer would go into one of their banks. They've been banking there for 20 years or so, and they would say to like the teller, "Wow, so wait, your name's changed. What's going on with that?" And the response was, "Yeah, we got bought."
Yeah.
Not right, just we got bought. And what a missed opportunity for that teller to say, "Yeah, it's changing, but this is great. We're now connected to a global chain, a global network of banks. If
Yeah.
you travel
Yeah.
abroad, then you're going to have much more benefits. We bring this da 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 da. Da." There's such an opportunity to do that. So
Yeah.
that's an example I like to share of why it's so important and what you shouldn't do. But I talked to somebody a few years ago who was in charge of internal comms, and actually, I'm sorry, he was in charge of branding, and he
Yeah.
worked with internal comms, and they created they wanted to they created these social media cards
Yeah.
that they gave to employees, that they gave them. So what were their values? So they talked about, and then they gave them these graphics that employees could share and add in why those values were important to them, or maybe
Yeah.
just share them. Sometimes people don't feel comfortable putting wearing their heart on their sleeve, or
Mm.
admitting that I really love the fact that our company is compassionate. People don't necessarily feel the need to say that, but you could if you wanted. So they gave them all of these great cards, that social cards that they could share that were aligned with their values, and encourage them to talk about how that aligns with their values. And they had
Mm.
really great success.
Mm.
I think it was a large company. They had like 3,000 participants, and it really did increase the investment in the. They felt like they were increasing their investment in their jobs, in
Mm.
their teams, and in themselves. It was very successful to help employees share in a very easy way, and in a very believable way, about what was so great working at this company.
Yeah, yeah, I really like that. An approach that we use when, and again, it's a slightly different context, but it's more around where we're working with organisations to help them communicate their values either to their employees, usually to their employees, but not just communicate them as in a kind of like, here's the sort of 3 words you need to remember, and but more around a kind of a basis of what you just said there, which is kind of internalizing them, which is actually operationalizing them. So they can kind of think, well, how does that relate to your job though, and what you do? And we use this sort of approach, very similar approach, which is kind of, it's kind of tell a story where you've seen that thing, whether it's integrity
Mhm.
or kind of, generosity or whatever that value is, being kind of lived as it should be, via our definition. And it's amazing some of the stories that people come up with, because often they kind of, things that would never have been noticed otherwise, but now kind of looking through this lens of these values, it kind of brings it into focus. And I think it's really important to do that. And I think, I think it's a very similar sort of approach to the one that you've just talked about there, which is, kind of linking those brand values and those brand principles to individuals' own ways of doing things, but also making them kind of part of their work as well, or thinking about how that is embodied in their work.
Mhm.
Um, Excellent. I like that, and I like the Santander story as well. Yeah, you kind of you kind of you as a sort of a customer, you can kind of envisage those situations where you walk in and you kind of have an interaction with someone. I think no one's really thought about helping you to sort of tell this story a little bit better, have they? And it's kind of all a bit, kind of that they don't filter out any of their own thoughts that negative or otherwise about what's happened in the way that if it's been a takeover or something like that. I've seen that happen before.
Right, and in retail banking, especially, there
Mm,
are relationships in small towns
yeah.
that happen. So if this person had, if the teller probably knew the customers by name, they probably knew their kids and grandchildren's names, and so if they had a level of trust that they could have shared with the brand.
Mm,
if they had just been given the opportunity to do
Yeah.
so. And it's all about, Craig, it's all about, that's why I named the title of my book, Do They Care? It's all about getting people to care. So
Mm.
it's not enough for internal comms people to make certain that everyone knows what's going on in the company. It's also incumbent upon them to make people understand why it matters.
Yeah.
Why does it matter that we're doing A, B, or C? Why does it matter that we're doing it in this way, that we're approaching it from a perspective of research, or we're pursuing it from a perspective of diversity and inclusion? So why is that all important? So if you give people the tools that help them understand and articulate why something is happening, they're going
Mm.
to be much more at ease and eager to share that with the rest of the world.
Mm, mm. That's a really, really good point. And interestingly, I mean, how how much of that do you feel is sometimes down to the fact that, again, it goes back to this kind of misconceptions about branding, is that the part of that branding exercise hasn't been really to kind of uncover that emotional, kind of the Simon Sinek, why we exist in the first place. They could be very much around the kind of the what and the how. But did you find that that is a something that gets kind of brushed over, or not really kind of done to get sufficient detail when it comes to the why do we get out of bed every morning kind of questions?
Oh, absolutely.
Mm.
And that's exactly, what we try to do with our clients is we help them take a step back and remember, because most and this is, we're all guilty of this. We get
Mm.
so involved in what we do that we forget about the big picture. We forget
Mm.
about why we're doing what we do. We're just focused on getting everything done because we push ourselves to do so much.
Mm.
And it's easy for people. They have the whole, the analogy, you can't see the forest for the trees.
Mm. Yeah.
Well, many people are just staring at bark. You just
Yeah.
really have to step
Yeah.
back. And that
Mm.
too comes from a leadership position. Leaders have to be able to constantly remind not only their teams, but themselves why they do what they do and why
Mm.
it's important.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, definitely. So we've talked very much about what we should be doing. Let's talk a little bit more about how we should be doing it. And so, and I think in some organisations, there's a very natural fit between internal comms and whether it's branding, marketing, or whatever, external comms, or PR sometimes, get kind of grouped together with all of these different things. But in an organization, if someone's listening and we're kind of, well, internal comms do internal stuff, and the marketing
Mhm.
and branding people, they do all the external stuff. What are some practical ways that we can kind of maybe start to break down some of those barriers if they exist, but also even if they don't exist, to sort of kind of be a bit more joined up and kind of sell this, advocate this kind of philosophy that we've been talking about?
Sure. I think it also goes back to education. It's not
Mm.
only that people don't understand what branding is. I think a lot of leaders don't understand what internal comms is.
Mm.
There was a study a few years ago that found 70% of internal comms professionals reported that I'm reading this, reported
Mm.
that their executives were not interested enough to ask for metrics.
Mm. Mm.
And so that demonstrates to me that senior leadership thinks internal comms is just something they have to have.
Mm. Mm.
And it's really kind of in internal comms managers' best professional interest in some respect to align themselves with branding so they can start to demonstrate some value add to the bottom line.
Yeah.
If so, connecting. So make your CMO, make your chief branding officer your best friend. Talk to them about what you can do to help them further their agenda, and then of course take the appropriate amount of credit for it as you do
Mm.
that. So you're not seen as just an expense, you're seen as something that is active, you're seen as a resource that's actively adding to sales growth or whatever your organization's most important metrics are.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
really try to demonstrate at how internal comms is not just about making sure everyone knows that when benefits are reviewed, or when they have to have their performance reviews in, things like that. Make certain that you demonstrate that your employees via social media amplification, that you're having an active impact on how the company is perceived and how those goals are achieved.
Yeah.
I mentioned just one thing. A perfect example is social media amplification. Many internal comms organizations work with different social media platforms software that works with different social media platforms where
Mm.
the internal comms company can create a number of different social media messages and then give employees the opportunity to share them in their personal networks as they see fit. So social media amplification is a huge example of how internal comms people can really uh, make a connection between their work and the brand's goals. Again, whether
Yeah.
that's sales, whether that's customer service or perception, or if you're a nonprofit, donations or funding or things like that.
Yeah. No, that's just really interesting. I've heard internal communicators talk about that quite a lot. I mean, there was a lot of this around obviously the pandemic and kind of getting the place at the table that internal comms deserved around being seen as a valued business partner rather than a kind of just a sort of nice to have. And so I think that was good. But I always worry, and I agree with you. I think it always worries me when kind of you talk to people and they say, oh, they just let us get on with it. They don't really kind of get what we do. They just sort of,
Mhm.
kind of, say, yeah, fine, which is all well and good. If being left alone and just to do your own thing is what you want, and you don't kind of, but the danger of that obviously is when people want to tighten their belts, then they kind of, because
Right.
they just, they don't understand what you do and don't really see the investment element of that, then it's the kind of thing that they'll say, well, we don't really, it's just a sort of bit of fluff and nonsense. So, yeah, so I think you're absolutely right there. And we've talked about this a number of times on the podcast, the importance of having metrics, measuring what you do, being in a not in a kind of negative sort of bragging way, but the
Right.
kind of shouting about what you've achieved, but also making those connections with other people within the organization and showing the return on investment. I think it's really, really, really important. I mean, I think we've talked about this, but the value of internal comms aligning with branding, and I think you've got a tool or a template that we're going to put into the show notes. Do you want to just say a little bit more about that and the template that we're going to share with the listeners to sort of pick up and use?
Sure, sure. So, one of the things I talked about early on when we began our discussion is the idea of how does your brand come to life?
Hmm.
So, different brands have different personality attributes, whether it's pride or resourcefulness or gratitude or any number of different brand attributes. Um, if you can, so I have a template that will show you how to take a specific topic
Yeah.
and then how to align your themes for the year. So let's say you have a theme about your organization has a theme about planning for 2027 in 5 years from now. So planning for 2027, or focusing on service delivery
Yeah.
or sustainability. So if you have major themes that you talk about throughout the year, you can find ways to tell those stories using the brand personality attributes of your brand.
Hmm.
So if you're talking about pride, you say things like, if you're talking about planning for 2027, you want to, you want to integrate a brand personality in it, of say fearlessness. You
Yeah.
say we've had some tough years. We don't know what's going to happen, but we are certain that we are going to plan for 2027 as best we can, and here's how we're going to do it. Or we take pride in the fact that we've been resilient over the last few years, and we're going to continue to be proud of the work we do because here's how we're going to do it. So if you can understand the brand strategy in terms of how the brand's supposed to come to life, how you differentiate yourself from one organization to a next, if you can bring that to life in the major themes that you've been asked to focus on throughout a
Yeah.
calendar year, then you can demonstrate a connection to the brand and you can genuinely help the brand come to life more authentically.
Excellent, excellent. And where do we get that? How do I get that the template, Douglas? Is that, have we got a link? Are we going to put a link into that? Is that one of the links that
Well,
you've shared with me, or
yep, we will put a link. I'll give you a link, and it will be message.builders. So that's a
yeah,
URL, message.builders
yeah.
slash internal comms.
Excellent. Okay, well that's brilliant. We'll put that. I've got some other links that we're going to put into the show notes that I'll talk about in a second after we've wrapped up as well, and I'll go through those. Okay, that's been amazing. So just sort of summarizing then, what I've taken from this is it kind of reiterates the importance of having a kind of a congruence between your internal and your external brand, the value and the importance of your employees as kind of brand advocates, and that kind of connection to leadership and language that we use, I think is something that you've really reinforced for me, for the listeners there, Douglas, and also you, as we've laboured on and kind of really drilled into this connection between the role of internal comms and how that can be more connected to branding, and how can reinforce that natural fit. Before we wrap up and just talk about the links in the show notes, anything else that any other kind of key takeaways that you want us to major on, Douglas, before we bring things to a conclusion?
Sure, and that's it, that I would say that branding can also make in the internal comms professional's job easier in many
Mm,
respects, because
mm,
it gives you the foundation of the messaging that you want to share. You don't have to reinvent the wheel every time.
mm,
If you are charged with focusing on employee engagement, if you have a great brand strategy, then you've got all the ingredients you need. Again, talking about why what you do is matter, and then developing pride in how you do it differently and better than anybody else.
mm,
So the
mm.
brand can also work for internal comms agendas just as much as internal comms can support branding agendas.
Yeah, that's a really, really, really good point as well. Yeah, so it is a sort of yin yang symbiotic relationship between the two. So yeah, I like that. I like that. Well, look, that's been really, really fantastic, Douglas. So links that we're going to put into the show notes. So for anyone's listening to this and they kind of they're not in a position to write these down, we've got a link through to Douglas's LinkedIn profile, which I'm assuming you're happy for people to reach out to you and connect with you. Yeah,
Absolutely. I
yeah.
absolutely. I love meeting new people, and I love having this kind of conversation, and absolutely.
Fantastic. We've got the link to your website, Spencer Brenneman LLC. Messaging on a Mission podcast. Tell us a little bit. We haven't talked about your podcast. Do you want to tell us a
Yeah.
little bit about that? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a podcaster too. So in 2020, I made the shift from helping pretty much anybody that would let me um, help them with their branding to focusing on purpose driven or mission driven organizations.
Yeah.
So these are organizations that are trying to solve some sort of broader problem that we all face, and
Hmm.
not just increase shareholder value. Not that there's anything wrong with that. That's a
Yeah.
very important part of our economy and how we work, but I want to focus on those organizations who are trying to help us all.
Yeah.
And so, a lot of not-for-profits, pharmaceutical companies that are trying to really take on some healthcare challenges that nobody else has. So we really try to focus on those kind of organizations. And so, messaging on a mission is. Are those conversations brought to life? So we talk to people who are at those kind of organizations. We talk to them about, say, what's going to be the future of events? Will they go back to being in person? Will they
Mm, mm.
stay all virtual? What will the hybrid look like? We talk to them about how to coach their folks to be better speech givers. We talk about the role of market research, all different things that will improve how organizations who are on a mission improve how they get their message out.
Wonderful. Oh, I like that. Hadn't picked up on that, and I'll be giving that a listen myself. And maybe when after we wrap up the interview, I've got a few people who I can put you in contact with who are leading those sorts of purpose driven organisations who, you might be interested in speaking to them. So that's really, really good. Excellent.
Oh, that's brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And again, the final link we'll put in is the link to the template that you mentioned as well, and
Right.
we'll pop that into the show notes as well. So if anyone's listening to the show show and they're out driving or running or at the gym or whatever, jump across onto the show notes and you'll find these links that we've just talked about. So look, that's absolutely fantastic, Douglas. Thank you so much for your time and your insights and your knowledge. I found that a really, really interesting interview, and it's kind of made lots of connections, and that's what I like about all of these interviews that we host on the show. It's kind of this beautiful web of connected ideas, rather than sort of seeing all of these different specialisms as discrete, unrelated topics. I think, internal comms is such a broad area that often gets just sort of, as you said, in the interview, gets like branding, gets kind of stereotyped into a very narrow area, but it's much broader than that. So that's fantastic. So thank you, Douglas. I wish you all the best for the rest of this year, and appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, and all the best to you and your listeners as well.
Thank you. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Engaging Internal Comms podcast. If you've got any ideas for episodes you'd like us to cover in future, you can email us at info@thebigpicturepeople.co.uk, or you can use the feedback form at engagingic.com. If you're not already subscribed to the show via your podcast platform, please do so. And if you could leave a review for us, that would be absolutely fantastic. We have links to other episodes at engagingic.com. All of our previous episodes are available there. And if you're interested in our visual communication services, our big pictures, our learning maps, our explainer videos, and also our live graphic recording, please get in touch with us again at info@thebigpicturepeople.co.uk. Thank you.